Great. And all right, I think it's 4 minutes after, so let's get started. So welcome to today's session on the Leaders Collective. We're so excited to have you. Today, we're gonna be focused on our CMO scorecard, the advertising metrics that matter for business outcomes. I see a few familiar faces from the last time, but for those of you that I have not had the chance to meet yet, my name is Chantel Augustin. I'm the Global Vertical Marketing Lead here at LinkedIn. I've been here for about 4 years. It seems like just yesterday, but I've been here for 4 years. And I'm so excited to be hosting this session because it's going to be alongside my favorite group here at LinkedIn, the B2B Institute. So I'm so excited to be kicking it off, and I'm going to be turning it over to them for our today's presentation. So we're going to be kicking off today's programming with a workshop hosted by John Lombardo, the global head of research at the B2B Institute. And halfway through the presentation, we're going to be doing some breakout sessions where you'll get an opportunity to speak amongst your peers and also some LinkedIn experts from the B2BI Institute that you're going to have a chance and opportunity to talk through some of the topics that we are covering today. But before we jump into today's topics, just a few housekeeping notes. Throughout this session, please ask questions. Use the chat, but I know John, he wants this to be very conversational, so feel free to raise your hand or come off mute and ask your questions. After the session, we're going to ask you to fill out a brief survey. You guys are all marketers, so please take the survey because we want to hear from you. We want to hear about the topics that we shared today, but also any topics that you want to hear in the future. And then we're going to have a little bit of a raffle. So we're going to be picking one winner and giving a 6-month subscription to our LinkedIn Premium Plus. So look forward to that as well. And at any point, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, just ping us. Usually if you reset, it'll, the deal with Zoom, you just reset and it'll probably come back again. But if you have any technical difficulties of seeing the slides or hearing from us, just ping us. And I have a team behind me that'll help support you. So let's kick it off. So like I said, today's topic is going to be the CMO scorecard, advertising metrics that drive business outcomes. And John Lombardo is going to be talking about how to identify the creative metrics that generate memory among the 95% of buyers who are out of market. He's also going to share how to make more informed trade-offs with your media budget to maximize reach and minimize cost. And then he's also going to discuss how to link your advertising activities to business outcomes. So just a little bit about John. He's the head of research at the B2BI Institute at LinkedIn, where he researches how marketing contributes to the creation of sizable and durable cash flows. And John brings an outside-in approach to marketing, looking to apply mental models from other disciplines, the Lindy effect being his favorite. And he obsesses over the contrarian matrix and searches for contrarian and right ideas. Prior to LinkedIn, John led GE's Social Media Center of Excellence, where he focused on commercial efforts across major social platforms. So John, thank you for joining us today. Like I said, falls in the air. Before I turn it over to you, tell us a little bit about what you're looking forward to besides pumpkin. Maybe there's something else you want to share with us.
Yeah, I mean, you read that thing. I wrote that thing, and that was the kind of thing like it's meant to be read, but never read, if that makes sense. So the fact that it was read, obviously mortifying. Apologize to everybody for having to sit through that. I love pumpkin bread. Pumpkin bread I had a pumpkin spice latte once, and I've never had such a sweet drink in my entire life. I would never have. I actually think I dumped it on the LinkedIn floor, not on purpose, but it turned out to be the right thing. I'm actually very excited for pumpkin bread, but just in general, my daughter's 3 and she's really excited about Halloween. She really is going to be a witch, the cutest little witch this year. So
she's already decided. That's so cool.
Yeah. Because we have this book called The Room on the Broom, and it's all about this witch, and she has all these friends that get on the broom with her. They're all animals. So anyways, that's what I'm excited for. Family time, fun time, October time.
All right, nice. Well, I will turn it over to you, John.
All right. Let me share my screen and get my Zoom windows arranged here, and then we will alight on this wonderful journey together. As Chantal said, we're going to stop for any questions you have along the way. So put them in the chat. There are 3 distinct sections here. At the end of every section, we'll stop. We'll take questions. It's a small group, so let's just be informal about it. Ask any questions you want. The only bad questions are the ones that you do not ask. So we are really quite obsessed with trying to be more quantitative around, in particular, brand advertising, but all advertising really needs to be quantitative. Marketing often suffers in B2B, especially from the fact that it isn't as quantitative as sales. It isn't as quantitative as finance. And so we don't necessarily have a seat at the table in the way that sales or finance do. So we need to get more quantitative, just generally speaking, in B2B marketing, but especially in B2B brand advertising. So that's a lot of what you're going to see today, is different ways to think about, like, how can I really think in very prescriptive terms about brand advertising, especially, and we feature a lot of data and some new metrics. So I really like this idea of thinking about every business as an equation. And if you can understand the equation, then you can understand what the key variables are. Then you can understand how to optimize or grow those key variables to grow your business. So I believe every business can, be distilled into some sort of simple equation. As evidence of that, there is an equation around how advertising works. And this is not a surprising thing. It is basically half of the value is creative and half of the value is media. And that's what drives your outcomes. This isn't a surprise because, as you all know, the advertising industry has two types of agencies. There are creative agencies and there are media agencies. So this idea that creative and media determine the outcomes in an advertising campaign, it is not surprising. But what's nice about this is it gives you some sense for the numbers that underpin that statement. So creative is roughly half of the equation. And then different ways of thinking about media are the other half of the equation, roughly. It's technically 85%, 47% for creative, 38% for brand, for media, and 15% for brand. But the truth is, you do not control the size of your brand at any point. That's what brand means. Bigger brands, they are more likely to be noticed and be bought. That's an economies of scale idea. So that's really, we take that out of the equation because you can't control that. Your brand's either big or small when you join it. You're trying to make it bigger, of course. So creative and media matter. That's really what we're going to look at. So, of course, one of the beautiful things about the fact that creative and media drive outcomes is that if you put these three letters together, you get the word CMO. And the CMO, as you all know, is the most senior person in the marketing org. So it just happens to serendipitously be that the way that advertising works is also the name of the most senior person in the marketing org. And so in an effort to both be sort of practical and pragmatic about the key metrics that matter, and also to flatter the CMO, we have named it the CMO Scorecard. And we will look at creative and media and how those link to outcomes. One of the other cool things that can be done here is because we've set essentially 9 standardized variables, we can score every company on those variables. So we can look at your company, we can look at your competitors, we can look at the broader players in your category, and we can look at how you rank from top to bottom. Are you in the top percentile? Are you in the bottom percentile? How are you on creative? How are you on media? How are you on outcomes? So this is, in some sense, it's a nascent B2B advertising database, a B2B advertising effectiveness database, really. B2C is really lucky. B2C has all of this data going back probably 50, 60, 70 years, where every time you buy something, they scan it and they know what you bought and the amount, when you bought it, which credit card it was bought with. So they have all of this data where they can look at the Scantron data and the credit card data, and they have all of this evidence that they can then mine for research on how marketing works. We don't have this same benefit, the same database in B2B. So we are trying to get at what makes for better creative media and outcomes by building, in some ways, as I said, a nascent advertising database here. So we're going to go into creative first, because when we looked at our chart there with the numbers, creative is the number one thing that matters. So we're going to start with the number one thing that matters. And remember, for creative, there's an ABLE framework. And an ABLE framework, your creative must be able in order to generate business outcomes. And we'll start with just I think a somewhat still contrarian view in the world of advertising, especially digital advertising, which is that clicks are not as important as people think that they are. People obsess over clicks and click-through rate and cost per click, but that's not really what matters. What matters is attention. You can see an ad and remember the brand and buy that brand without ever clicking. In fact, there's a cool idea that I like called the refrigerator test. And the refrigerator test is simply a test of, next time you're at home, open your refrigerator door, look at all of the brands in your refrigerator, and you will realize that you buy all of these brands and you've probably never clicked on an ad from any of those brands. So the idea that you have to click on something in order to buy something is just a fallacy. And so what matters more is attention. We mostly buy things from memory, not from clicks. And so attention is really, really important, especially to creative effectiveness. So if attention's incredibly important, then of course that's going to be the number one thing we look at even in this section here around able. So the idea of able is your ads must get attention, be well branded, and be on message, which we call linkage. And if you have A, B, and L, all those things, and you run that over time, you get brand equity, you build brand equity. So creative must be able, attention, branding, linkage builds equity. So let's talk about attention now. This is something that is a new metric for LinkedIn. You have maybe heard the idea of attention talked about in the broader industry. It's certainly becoming a bigger topic, a bigger metric. So on our platform, we have something called dwell. So viewability is well understood in our industry. It is literally, is the ad on screen or not, right? But there's a different idea we consider here called dwell, which is to say, how long is the ad on screen for? Not just is it on screen, how long are at least 50% of the pixels on screen for? And that idea it's called dwell in our database, but we call it attention because it's easier for people to understand, but it's how much, essentially, how long the ad's on screen. So what we will generally do for you is we would look at your company and we would look at all of your competitors and we would pull in all of the ads over the last year. And each of these dots here would represent one of your ads, but we'd pull in all of your competitors and we just look at the average attention that those ads get. Let's say it's a couple seconds. We set whatever the average is at 100. So 100 is average. And then we plot your ads against that competitive average. And what you see here is, imagine this is your company. Any of the high green dots, those are on screen much longer and so have higher attention. Or if they are not getting attention, if people are scrolling right through it, then they're low red dots, which means people are not paying attention. And so it's just simply trying to understand among your portfolio of ads against your competitive set, what are your most attentive ads and what are your least attentive ads? That's the thing that we're trying to do. So an example would be, right, like these ads here that are the high green dots are high attention ads. This might be an example of one, and we're trying to give you essentially data. This is, in my mind, like if clicks is $1 billion a year industry or a multi-billion-dollar a year industry for LinkedIn, a click is really for a lead gen marketer. And it has to be balanced with the brand metric, which in this case would be attention. So think of attention as like the metric you would track for brand advertising, whereas clicks is the thing you track for lead gen advertising. We care a lot about reach too. One of the big mistakes that companies make is, of course, because we don't make this data available to marketers, they don't know how to optimize this, right? So what happens is people are generally spending a lot of money. Like if you look at the red dots that are far to the right, far out on the horizontal axis, those are ads where they're not getting attention, but the marketer's still investing a lot of money, reaching a lot of people with those ads. So we're trying to help people with this metric identify high attention ads and invest more in those, because of course you're more likely to be remembered, if people pay close attention to the ad versus if they ignore the ad. So the reverse is of course also true. If you take one of these low attention ads, right, we want you to not spend money on the low attention ads because you're going to be marketing something to people, spending money on something where the creative is just not relevant, it's not resonant, so they're just going to scroll right through. That's not what you want, right? And so generally, if you look at the last ad, it was talking about, hey, if you're a freelancer, like what makes more sense for you from a wage perspective? This is not about, and things that are about the user, they tend to pay attention to. Things like this, which is just the company saying like, we have a conference, zero context, these things tend not to do as well. So when you look at like what's attentive and what's not, you generally find that if it appeals to the user, it's going to be attentive, or the member. And if it doesn't, if it's irrelevant, then it's not going to be something that they look at. They're going to scroll right through it. So this idea is attention, and this is how we measure it. The second part is it's not enough just to get attention. You must also have a well-branded ad. If you get attention and it is not a well-branded ad, then unfortunately what happens in that instance is the biggest company in the category ends up getting all of the benefit from that because you raised awareness through an ad about cloud computing for cloud computing, but you didn't brand it properly. And so AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Compute, they get the benefit of that unbranded or low branded advertising. So this, what you're seeing here is actually some research we did with a company called Distinctive Bat, where we took a bunch of big brands, I think 12 or 15 brands in the cloud computing category. And we ran what's called a distinctive asset test. And that simply means you take an ad, an image like the smile, for example, and you show it to the person, it's a survey, and you say, hey, do you recognize this? And they have to say yes or no. And so what you see on the vertical axis here is how many people say, yes, I recognize that. So for the arrow from Amazon, something like 90% of people say, yes, I recognize that ad, or that image rather, that icon. And then you say, okay, you recognize it. Well, what brand does it come from? and they have to actually name the brand. And so you see here is 90% of people say that they recognize the arrow. And then when you ask them to name the brand, only about 77, 78% of people can correctly name that brand as Amazon. So this is a way to understand the quality of your brand assets. What do people recognize and correctly attribute to your brand? And then what is the stuff that they do not, recognize and cannot attribute? And in fact, unfortunately, other than maybe Amazon and Microsoft and Google in the world of cloud computing, which obviously is an enormous category with lots of money, at play, most brands are in this sea of sameness where, maybe only 50% of people even recognize the image or the icon or the asset. And then if you ask them to name the brand, here the numbers are startlingly low. It's maybe like 10%, 20%. And you actually have to multiply these two numbers together to get correct branding or correct brand attribution. So if 50% of people can recognize the image or the asset, and then only 20% of that 50% name the brand properly, it means only 10% of people actually recognize your brand assets and can name your brand, which means that 90% of your advertising is wasted because only 10% know who you are. That it means, 90% don't. So this is the kind of research that we've been doing into a number of different B2B categories. We've done it for cloud computing. We've done it for CRM. We've done it for business intelligence. We've done it for small business insurance and for small business banking. And you see the same pattern repeat across all 5 of these different categories, which is that there's generally 2 or 3 companies that are extremely well branded, that have many, well branded, well recognized distinctive assets. And almost everybody else, isn't even really a brand, to be honest with you. The best company in the world, in my opinion, right now, or at least the best company in the United States, in my opinion, when it comes to branding, is Liberty Mutual, where they have 2 characters, Doug and Emu. They have the yellow and the blue. They have the Statue of Liberty. They have my favorite jingle in the world, Liberty, 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 Liberty. They have the only pay for what you need. So they have multiple different brand assets that almost everybody knows because of the quality of their branding and the breadth of their advertising. And the core idea really is to think about having an advertising style in the way that Liberty Mutual has an advertising style. Literally every single frame in their advertising is unmistakably them. There's never a single frame that isn't yellow and blue at a minimum. Generally, it has yellow and blue, 2 characters, the Statue of Liberty. It's like overkill is underrated when it comes to branding. And that's really something B2B brands ought to take to heart, because again, when you look at the actual distinctive assets I just showed you on the last slide, nobody knows them. And then, of course, when you look at them as an advertising style, nobody recognizes the advertising style of these brands. So you show them an actual ad, and they have generally no idea who it comes from. Maybe Google they know, or Amazon because of the smile they know, but everybody else, including Microsoft, really doesn't score very well. So there's plenty of opportunity. It's maybe one of the biggest, most obvious optimization opportunities in advertising is simply just better branding. Like here's an example from a company called Upwork. We love Upwork, but they're a green, company, or they have a green brand identity and their ads are purple and orange. So like if you're a green company, that's your brand identity, make your ads green. Don't make your ads purple and red. People are not going to be able to remember that, it came from Upwork. So that's attention and branding. You got to get attention. It's got to be well branded. It's also got to be on message. As I always say here, like if you talk about cats and bacon, that's not going to help you, right? Because you're not selling cats and bacon. So what does your company sell? And then how do you talk about what your customer sells? Not through product features, but through customer benefits or customer needs. So if you think of all of your ads, we can look at all of your ads and we can visualize them based on the amount of attention that they get. So a big circle here is a high attention ad that gets lots of reach. A small circle is either a low attention ad that gets no reach, or it is basically, it's a low attention ad that gets no reach. Very simple. So we want to size based on basically pool of attention or circle of attention, your ads, and then look at what the actual topic that's being discussed is. What's the messaging? And what we generally find is that not enough brands are talking about things like easier or learn, which is more focused on the member or the customer. And generally they're talking about themselves, like the brand SaaS, the brand Azure, the brand Via. So this is the constant tension, right? Brands want to talk about themselves. Customers want to hear about themselves. So the language of your advertising needs to be, your brand has to be you, but the message should be the customer. And so that's the kind of balance that needs to be struck. So, these are some what we call category entry points. These are reasons that people work with your brand, right? It's because they want to buy you because they're launching a new business, or they need to cut costs in their business, or do better data analysis, make faster decisions, do an integration with whatever their cloud provider is. These sorts of verbatims that come from the customer, they ought to be what show up in these circles, right? It shouldn't be your brand name and your brand products. It should be the customer needs that you're solving. So we can kind of bring this all together in a very visual way and say, this current way of looking at it, this brand's talking too much about itself and not enough about its customers. We can get down to the individual message level, which is cool. So an individual ad will generally have a key topic that it's talking about. So this is analytics, but imagine it's the key topic that matters to your brand, whatever it is, right? Business intelligence, analytics, cloud computing, banking, insurance. We can actually look at all of the ads you're talking about that are about analytics or reliability or scalability or savings or whatever the customer need is. And we can help you understand, are you investing in the right ads, high attention ads? Are you then getting a lot of reach against them? And so a way that we will generally visualize this is we'll show you your ads and all your competitors' ads. We'll show you at the bottom, those are low reach ads. At the top, those are low attention ads. At the top, those are high attention ads. Let's make sure we only invest in the high attention ads in this key topic, in this key theme, to make sure that you reach your customer at scale with a high attention ad about a topic that they care about, that they benefit from. So we really have quite prescriptive ad level or creative level detail that we can go into. And then we score companies on this. So we say, hey, here's how you're doing on attention against your competitors. Here's how you're doing on branding against your competitors. Here's how you're doing on messaging or linkage with your competitors. And this is the way that we kind of apply this very quantitative, very creative able framework to figure out if your creative is in fact able, or if your competition is more able than you. And then we give you prescriptive recommendations on how to make this better. So let me pause there and see if you have questions before I motor on. Hopefully I haven't left you entirely speechless. Hopefully there is some speech. Do we have any brave souls?
I don't have any questions because I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'll take that. I'll take that. Overkill is underrated. Good. I'm glad you like that. I've used that line a lot over the years. So I feel like that's one of those things that I would like to say that I came up with that on the spot, but absolutely I did not come up with that on the spot, off the spot, very much off the spot. All right, let's keep going then. And we'll stop at the end of media as well to see if you have questions there. So media, in the same way in creative, we think of, kind of creative must be able. In media, we very much follow the rules of reach. So in the same way that in creative, marketers obsess over clicks when they auto obsess over attention, in media, marketers obsess over targeting when they auto obsess over reach. There's a really cool idea here called the share of voice rule, which, basically just says like, figure out what your market share is and then, reach more people than is your market share. So if your market share is, let's say, like 20%, you ought to spend at least 20% of the money in the category, which would be your share of voice. But ideally, you spend more than your market share in share of voice. But the core idea, like in even simpler terms, is just always be reaching more people than your customer base. And like it should be 5 or 10x more than the size of your customer base. A fun way of thinking about this is that targeting, like tight targeting can find customers, but broader targeting can create customers. And we're going to talk about the idea of broader targeting being about demand creation a little bit later. So there's 3 ways we think about media planning and measuring media planning and the quality of it. One is effectiveness, scale, one is evenness, spread, and then one is efficiency, so how you spend wisely or not. So the number one thing we look at is this idea of effectiveness. You've got to spend in sufficient scale to be competitive in the marketplace. So we will look at something basically here, we call it, it's like a rolling weekly reach. So we want to understand against your category, your potential buyers, let's say your audience is 10 million people. What percentage of those 10 million people are you reaching? And what percentage of those 10 million people are your competitors reaching? And, companies generally don't get enough reach against their buyers, or don't even realize how much reach they are getting against their buyers. This is something that, especially in digital, we don't focus enough on reach. Just a fun tip for you. January is the cheapest time to buy on-target reach against IT decision makers or business decision makers or mass affluent or accountants or the construction industry, whatever it is you want to buy against prescriptively. January is the best time to do it, because most companies are still trying to get their plan together in January. They're doing planning and they don't activate until February or such. So this is a great time to buy media, because literally prices are 30-40% cheaper than they will be other points during the year. There's no spend in January. There's always lots of spend at the end of a quarter and at the end of the year, right, when it's much more expensive. So there are just some very simple ways to be smarter about how you spend to get more reach against the category. So the category reach is one view, but then there's, of course, just your reach, right? What you control. And this is an idea called cumulative reach. So we look at the number of unique users you cumulatively reach over the course of a year. And what we really try to understand is, this is an example from a company that targets members in data science. So there's about 5 million data science professionals on our platform, and they are only reaching, about a quarter of them. And so we kind of just like to generally say, like, is this enough to meet your growth goals? Every company has ambitious growth goals. They're often not getting enough reach. If you just do the simple math of reach this many people and this tiny number percent of people convert, is that even enough to meet my goals as a company? And it generally isn't. So, competitive view matters because advertising is a competitive sport, but then the company view matters because, of course, you've got to think about kind of just your funnel in simple terms. Like, I've got to reach enough people to hit whatever my bottom funnel number is. So cumulative reach is the second way that we think about effectiveness, which is, again, scale. We then look at evenness.
Hey, Don. Sorry,
Yes,
just a
please.
quick question. I popped it into the chat, but how are you calculating the TAM? Is it based on LinkedIn
is,
user
yes.
data? Okay.
You got it. Yeah, you got it. I mean, I shouldn't say TAM. That's not the correct way to put it. It's a total addressable audience is really, I should call it TA, not TAM. You have the right interpretation there. But for
Is
everybody else,
that that audience, or is that something that we would determine?
that is
So
something
for
that,
example, you had the data, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but if, for example,
Right.
like the data scientist,
Yep.
maybe there's 10 million data scientists, but how many data scientists are there in companies where their revenue is $1 billion or more?
Yeah, we can cut that in a variety. I mean, we can look at data science professionals. We can look at it by company size. I believe we can probably even infer from company size, company revenue. So there are ways that we can cut that. But you as the marketer, as the advertiser, you determine the audience. So you would say to me, there are 10 million that I want to reach, and then we would show you the data based on your target audience. Is that helpful? Great. So the second bit is just evenness. This whole section is called rules of reach, and I am a reach maximalist. And I believe that the number one thing companies ought to optimize for, especially when it comes to brand advertising, is the number of unique members reached, in their category or in their addressable audience. And a way to maximize unique reach and minimize excess frequency is to spread your money out over the course of the year. So in an ideal world, absent seasonality, you would just spend 2% every week, right? If you have a big conference or you have a big product launch, then it makes sense to spend more in a specific, let's say, month or week than others. But, we just did an analysis of evenness, and very few companies, if any companies, big or small, finance or tech, are spending evenly. So evenness is just another very simple old idea in media planning that is probably undervalued today. So one dimension of evenness is time. The other dimension is just top of funnel, bottom of funnel, or what we call here demand creation, which is creating customers is what brand does, capturing customers is what lead gen does. So we can just look at what percentage of your spend is brand, what percentage of your spend is leads, and what we generally see is almost zero companies spend money on brand advertising on LinkedIn, right? And you might argue that, well, we spend it on TV, or we spend it on billboards, or we spend it other places. And to that, I would say, yes, as long as you have balance across channels, that makes sense. But, LinkedIn and LinkedIn video, especially, I think is just an underrated, undervalued, underappreciated opportunity, in particular to run broader reach advertising that can get attention, and assuming it's well branded, non-message, can do a good job building brand memory or memory structures, so that in the future, when they think of your category, they think of your brand and your products and they buy you. So this is something that, just like a fun anecdote here, or anecdata, I guess I would call it. overall on our platform, I think something like 17% of spend is on what I would define as a brand awareness objective, and 83% of spend is defined as a lead gen objective. So it just means everybody spends all of their money on LinkedIn on lead generation. And I believe that that just means that the brand advertising opportunity on LinkedIn, it's just priced very cheaply. So you can probably get a lot for your money if you run the campaigns in a very specific way, which is generally brand awareness objective, video or carousel or static image, and optimizing as your default for unique reach. So that's evenness. There's a time dimension, and then there is also kind of a top of funnel, bottom of funnel dimension. And then there's efficiency, which of course everybody cares about. You know, we all want to be efficient. We all want to be smart allocators of our capital. So one of the things that we look at and is this idea called cost per reach. So cost per reach is very simple. It is the amount of money you spend divided by the unique number of people that you reach. That's your cost per reach. And of course, you know, we're looking at unique reach. So we're trying to dedupe. And, you know, just to show you, you know, across different objectives, you know, no surprise, lead gen is the most expensive way to do this, because lead gen is run on a cost per click basis where it's generally reaching the same people over and over who've shown a propensity to click before. And of course, it's done with tight targeting. Whereas brand advertising is generally the opposite. It's not run on a CPC basis, it's run on a CPM basis, and it's more about reach, and it's not about frequency. So you can just look at the kind of difference in numbers here and see that, you know, brand type objectives are around 8 cents or 10 cents to reach an individual member. You know, if it was broader targeting, this number would even go down. So, you know, this company is targeting, you know, 5 million people. If they were targeting 10 or 20 or 30 million people, honestly, as they probably should, then these numbers go down, you know, probably by half. So it could be around 5 cents. You know, so lead gen's like 5, 6, 7, 8 times more expensive than brand advertising, you know, and there may be, or brand awareness, but there may be fine reasons for that. It's just worth noting that. And in general, I would just reinforce for you that if you pay $6 million for a Super Bowl ad and you reach 100 million people, it's basically 6 cents to reach a member or a person, right? And so what you're really looking at is, you're looking at kind of like a B2B Super Bowl scale. You know, you have the ability to reach enormous numbers of members on LinkedIn with very, you know, solid, you know, kind of granular targeting, but you can do it at this scale that is kind of Super Bowl scale. So that is the efficiency bit, which is really thinking hard about cost per reach. And we do this in lots of different categories. So you can look at it by industry, you can look at it by job function, you can look at it by company size, per the conversation or comment earlier. You can look at it by seniority, senior people, junior people, VP. So there's lots of ways that the structure of LinkedIn data going back 20 years, you know, from kind of the founding of the company, that structured data allows us to cut the data in many different ways that give you very interesting views into cost per reach. And, you know, I would think about, you know, what kind of industries do you want to grow in? What kind of functions do you want to grow in? And are you reaching enough of those people at sufficient scale, you know, with cheap cost per reach? And of course, we can score you on all of this stuff, you know, how you're doing, and then of course, how you're doing against your competitors. So let's see if there's any questions before we hop into the breakout groups. My fellow Italian, Michael Pannone, likes reach maximalism. That's lovely. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. No questions. All right, that's fine, because we're going to go into a breakout group where there's going to be prompted questions and you're going to have no choice but to answer. So look forward to some mandatory fun in a second. We're back. We're back. We had a great conversation. Great conversation. Michael and Tiffany and Lauren did a great job talking about everything. And it was very interesting. We'll have to share some of the insights with everybody so we can all benefit from what we learned. I think one of my favorite things is that Tiffany, who's from Fisher, is the only company I've ever met with where they told me in the meeting they always have their campaigns ready to go January 1st. I've never ever met any other company that's ready to go January 1st. Most people are having champagne on January 1st, but Fisher is having champagne and their campaigns are running while they're having champagne, which is the real reason to have champagne, that your campaigns are running January 1st. That aside, let me share my screen again, and we'll take it home from here. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of what we call kind of outcomes data. I mean, obviously outcomes are difficult to measure. You know, that's one of the most famous things about advertising is I know 50% of my budget is wasted. I just don't know which half. So this is about a 150-year-old problem, but here are a couple of interesting ways that we are thinking about it. So we used to talk about, because there's three parts of our business: hiring, marketing, and selling. But we realized when we talk to marketers, nobody really cares about the hiring outcomes that we can generate with marketing, even though that marketing does help with attracting talent and retaining talent. But people are very interested in the sales and marketing alignment. So we're going to focus primarily on that. So an interesting thing just generally for you is when we were still talking about hiring, marketing, and selling, we did an analysis of 58 very big tech and finance companies just to understand, in particular, given my position as a reach maximalist, does reach correlate strongly with marketing outcomes like leads, or sales outcomes like connection requests accepted in Sales Navigator, or hiring outcomes like influenced hires? And what we found in particular, which is I think very valuable for all of us to know, is that reach is in particular really good, not just for building brand awareness. I think everybody thinks reach is good for brand awareness, but reach is actually the highest correlation among all the factors we looked at in media with leads as well. So I think if you want to generate more leads, a simple thing to do is within your targeting, double your targeting. Everyone's targeting too narrowly. And this indicates to me that there's an opportunity just to kind of be more broad, still within a reasonable set of people, to generate more leads. So that's the number one thing I'd like everyone to understand about just kind of reach as an option. Then the second thing we start to look at is, of course, reach defined kind of as a top funnel objective, is this idea of attention. So again, attention is simply, if I have an ad that's got 3, 4, 5 seconds of attention and I reach 1 million people, then I'm getting 3, 4, 5 million seconds of attention. We can size all of your ads by different pools of attention or circles of attention and look at your overall attention, number. We can compare that to your competitors. So here's Microsoft against 4 competitors, and we can tell you if you're winning the war for attention. I think this is a really useful way to think about measuring your brand advertising in a very quantitative way at a creative level. And then from a lead gen perspective, this is just kind of like a simple data viz we just did, but what you're looking at here is on the horizontal axis, the number of leads that, a company is getting. And this is a new lead gen marketer. So it's not generating a ton of leads, but, it could be generating 0 leads or it could be generating 14 leads. And on the vertical axis, you see the cost per lead. And then the size of the circle is the size of the spend on that campaign. And so what you can see here is that the ad that is generating the most leads over down here by 14, it's a very pale blue because it's not getting any spend. So what's happening is it's getting a lot of leads. The leads are cheap, but it's not getting a lot of spend. And there are red dots here, particularly the red dot around 3 leads. They're spending $3,500 on an ad that's not getting them any leads. So the reality is you should find these kind of things that are the expensive, low lead circles, like the highest blue dot and then this high red circle. You should always cut that kind of stuff and just reallocate kind of towards the bottom right-hand corner where you're getting better performance. I think if you're a very seasoned lead gen marketer, you understand this. If you're a newer lead gen marketer, this client, these are the sorts of simple things that we can help you to visualize just to make better decisions to get better performance. So top of funnel, we're looking at attention. Bottom of funnel, we're looking more obviously at lead gen performance. And then, of course, all of this is about generating more pipeline, more meetings, more opportunities for your sales team. So something that we know from our data is simply that when somebody sees an ad on our platform, they are more likely to respond to your sales teams. And there's 2 ways we track response to your sales teams. We look at either an in-mail, where I send you an in-mail request, which is basically an email on LinkedIn, or I send you a connection request, which I'm sure you probably all get every single day. And when we look at people who have not seen an in-mail or not seen a connection request, not seen a marketing message, their response rates are 4% or 31%, right? But when they've seen a message in the last 30 days, so marketing, building awareness, priming them to understand your brand, know your brand, we see that the response rates go way up. It's either 36% higher or 24% higher. But generally speaking, when you market to people, they become aware of your brand, they're more likely to respond to your salespeople. So this is the way that marketing helps accelerate sales. We can even look at when somebody accepts a connection request or an in-mail, what is the content that they most often saw before that? So we can give you, again, a view on what is the creative that is performing best in helping to generate sales outcomes. So this is kind of the creative angle on sales and marketing alignment. And then the media angle on sales and marketing alignment, which is very fun, is simply to look at if you have sales teams that use Sales Navigator, they're saving leads in the LinkedIn platform. And an interesting question is, how many of the people that are being saved by your sales teams as leads, how many of those people are being reached by marketing? And what we find is it's very low. So for example, in technology, where you would think there would be a lot of sales and marketing alignment because everyone talks about sales and marketing alignment so much, you find that only like 11% of leads that are being saved by sales teams are actually being reached by marketers. So it doesn't surprise me that marketing and sales are often fighting with each other, because sales is probably saying you're not helping me. And the truth is that if you look at a lot of this data, marketers are not reaching the people that sales is saving as leads. Now, marketing can go to sales and say you're saving the wrong people, but I don't know how marketing is necessarily going to be able to win that conversation, because, sales generally is more powerful than B2B org. So this is the kind of data, again, that you probably didn't even know existed. Like, honestly, we're just getting our heads around a lot of this data. I wouldn't say that this is something that anybody or many people really are using today, but the idea that we can show the overlap of your lead gen campaigns and your brand campaigns, or the overlap of your saved leads and your marketing spend or marketing reach. These are very interesting ways to make sure both your marketing is aligned with your marketing and your sales is aligned with your marketing. So these are ways we visualize it to try to help you just be more effective, have better go-to-market conversations with your sales teams. And we can score you on this kinds of stuff too. Yes, Kylia, how are you?
I'm doing well. I wanted to go back to an earlier point that you had made about reach having a high correlation with leads.
Yep.
And I wanted to know, like, what were the other metrics that you looked at when considering that correlation, and like how did they like compare to the 0.71?
The primary thing we looked at was reach versus frequency.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot
And what
of
was
people,
frequency?
frequency is like if I show you an ad.
Oh, I know what frequency is, but like the
What was the
correlation.
correlation? I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember that reach was much higher, and that was why I was really both delighted, but also I think many people would be surprised. I'd have to go back and look at it, but the top thing was reach.
Yeah, I'm asking because I'm definitely in the camp of reach is the way, especially with a brand. So whenever I see numbers that compare the two, I just want to let me grab that data point too. So
yeah, let me go dig it up for you and I'll send it to you. And if anybody else wants it, I can send it to you as well.
thanks.
Yep. Any other questions on this? This is I think the marketing and sales alignment stuff's quite interesting, quite juicy. Any other questions, thoughts? All right, I've left you all speechless, which is good and bad. It's good and bad. It's bad because I don't get to hear what's actually on your mind, but it's good because, I don't know why it's good, but I can tell you that it's bad. But it's good maybe because I did a good job. I don't know. That's possible too, right? That's a possibility. So, core idea here is just, to leave you again with, like, we covered a bunch of stuff. We had a nice breakout together. What are the core recommendations that I would make to you? It is maybe to think harder about the creative able framework, right? And are you measuring all these things? We can help you to measure all these things. And when you understand which creative is able, which creative is not able, you can invest in the best and you can divest from the rest. That's my first rhyme for you. Now let's get to media, right? In media, everybody invests too much at the bottom of the funnel, not enough in the top of the funnel. You need to create demand, create customers, not just capture customers, capture demand. And so my second rhyme for you is invest in brand, see increased demand. Previously, I didn't have a third rhyme. I would say better alignment, better outcomes. And then everyone would be like, oh my God, where's your third rhyme? Well, I'm delighted to let you know you're the first audience to ever hear my third rhyme, which is the more you align, the more you shine, which I think is a really positive note for us to end on. I'm probably going to get a lot of feedback on how cheesy it is too. It's a cheesy but positive, optimistic way to end the conversation. So, that is what I would say. Better, creative, broader media, bigger outcomes. So thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for all of your questions. I hand it back over to you, Chantal.
Yes, I wrote that down. I like it. The more you align, the more you shine. And I think you could take that into like a lot of different areas of your life too, and definitely your work too. So Thank you, John. Thank you so much for the entire BDBI staff and team for this insightful presentation and conversation. I know I speak for myself as a marketer. I was sitting here, I've heard some of the presentation before, but was taking notes that I know will even help me in my day-to-day work. So I know the team here, the collective members here also hopefully walked away with a lot of insights that'll help them as well. So coming up next, we will be sending out a newsletter in October where we're going to be featuring some of you members as well. So look out for that. I see my team put up the survey, so please take a moment to fill that out. Give us some feedback. We want to hear from you as well. And like I said, we'll be doing a bit of a raffle and we will be giving out a LinkedIn Premium subscription. So that's the incentive for you to fill out the survey. So thank you to all of you for joining. And again, look out for the newsletter and some more information from the collective team. Have a great afternoon.
I just posted in the chat, but can you email the deck over? Would love to send it to I have various teams who take care of LinkedIn, social ads, and everything.
Absolutely. We will also send that out as well.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.